esoteric principles of light, the purification kata in your area. So the energy is always flipping the tangent energy of principles of motion. You always have this center point, right? The pure source of force. Right? Purity. What happens is, as that great monad is spinning into its own, it recreates itself, like the Merkaba and the manipulations of the tree of life, which there are additions. But when we go just with Metatron's cube and its beginnings, how does it begin? So you have one ray that is stronger through this conical opening that's talked about within a sphere. So there really is no sphere, right? So in other words, here we have a direction. That direction is most likely 33 degrees, and it needs to be precise. I should be using a compass, a square, and an angle, but I am mapping out a very abstract here. What happens is the time signature and the distance, basically there is an energy, when we're talking about quarks and so forth, there is an energy that refracts back itself so minute that there probably is no time signature in order to calibrate itself. So you have this refraction back to an origin, a center, and from that you get this angular adjacency that's going on here. So you have this going, and then this starts the pivot. Now as this begins to occur, the duality, if you will, begins to occur. Yes, probably some of the energies bounce back, but there's a spin that is beginning to occur just over the construct of time itself. So now there is a measurement of time. And so going to get the angle occurring from this. And whether it's right or left, that's something that scientists have been looking into. But for sake of no better argument, we're just going along with the swirl on motion. And of course, the same thing's going to happen. You're going to have energies that bounce back this way. You're going to have energies that draw in here. You're going to have some energies that keep going, but mainly the driving force is the movement of this entire. Now already it knows the entire pattern because it's done this multiple times over and over again. And the probabilities from the first go make it undeniable. Whether or not this is something that was engineered and synthetic from the beginning, I believe this is a synthetic construct that is occurring on a quantum level. And just like Metatron's cube, it's refracting out and recreating itself in seeming number systems that seem like infinity, but there is no infinity. In fact, I believe that the Phi 21 number is the end of a cycle, and you can pander to it and say that there are numbers that go on beyond that. To me, these segments add up to 34. So you have this going on. You have boom, 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 just explaining this EPL sigil. And then the next place it's going to go, because it's already created this shell through the probability pattern. It's spinning. I mean, you could look at it as if it's taking place within a clock, and there is no time. So basically it's just like moving, going back to its original place, but at we're going to say a quarter turn, for lack of a better, but it's not a quarter turn. It's based on a specific ratio, distance, and I think that this ties into phi mathematics, but then as it moves, it's gaining in substance, right? And then back. Then it's going to flip and flit on itself, right? It's going to solidify this outer shell, you know, and a bifurcation will take place. And that's where you're going to see the reverse of this occur. So this is like the second edition right here. This. And a stronger, so you have an opening, you have that conical opening that we see. It's occurring here. It's a weaker structure, a weaker bond. And then you get into the concepts of this, and then, so you've got the bifurcation that takes place that's already trying to follow a parameter around a spherical moving structure. Some of these energies are going to travel downward, back to a center, but it's turning, it's spinning, it's flipping on itself. It's going through many rotations, but there is a specific number of rotations that it would have to go through before it reaches an end point, before no additional new information can be added, right? So this is following loosely a circular pattern, but it's also trying to come back in to this original place, right? And another bifurcation tries to take place there, but it is a weak bond, right? So you get a very similar thing going on there. So here, get the same type of thing going on. Made that a little bit large, obviously, right? And there are these junction points as everything is moving, as everything is spinning. And if you really look at this, so here you have a void. This is all kind of occurring all at the same time. It's drawn back to the center. But in this, you have the outer shell, right? You have an outer shell that's trying to occur to create a protective mechanism. Everything in electromagnetics tries to protect itself, you know. It's trying to protect the enthalpy, all the energy that it's culminated. Right? So it's kind of reaching out to this theoretical outer shell, right? And the interesting thing is you're kind of getting this face, this monad, this overall shape that's occurring here. This is because it's taking on a spherical motion through the movement. Because it's moving, it's going to take on this shape, but it's not going to compromise its original structure. So you start to see how these compartments, in a minimalistic sense, how these compartments come to be, you know. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then 21. And I've played with this structure in different ways more than once and come up with like the number 34. But to me, the number 21 is the end point. And if you look at 13 and 21, it's very bizarre how you'll always see this number system that's in repeat, such as like the days of the true months before, the Gregorian calendar polluted people's minds. When you really looked at it, a leap year, how that, if you were really if you were looking at not creating a construct, a structure of truth, and you looked and you were somebody who was able to, for a moment, look at the cycles, look at the annual cycles, look at how those annual cycles might deviate. Yes, the number 360 comes up, but there's more than 360. There's a void. There's like a 3-day void that's talked about in Christianity. It's talked about on many levels, but I believe that number is 3.3. I think that there's a culminating energy. It could be 3.1. There's a culminating energy through this conical opening, and that this is a procession that that displays a consciousness. This is intelligence. This is the replication of language. This is the replication of how the cultivation of agriculture works. You look at it through the mapping, you start to move. It dictates dance. It dictates the music, the solfeggio notes, and the unexpected. And I'm trying to investigate in the unexpected, in that margin that seems to be missing. And it is a time of latency. It's a time when a choice can be made with the direction of consciousness itself. And so I really believe this ties into, Behold the Sign. If you ever looked at that book, any esoteric studies, that most books, all the way down to the Kabbalah, it's like Terence McKenna's work. You look at the procession, the movement pattern, religions, how when you follow a process, you're trying to find how that process comes together. Even when you're creating like a geometrical construct of this, you're trying to mathematically and then philosophically prove or disprove. And there's always that little margin that loses everyone. And that is really the investigation of EPL. And I believe that we are to walk this procession, physically walk this procession. Just like, that's what we have to use, that's in a non-mechanical way, that's within our body, that's within our being. And I've investigated this and come up with some very freaky things that made me back away for a whole decade, because there is manifestation that occurs when you do follow the algorithm of where the Masonic lodge is in a town, where the library is, where the theater is, and so on. You start to see these certain civic centers that are pointed out, and they are in a secret, covert, private worship of a religion that is abstractly laid out for people are allowed to create their own religion based on the popularity of the people. But the true religion is observed by those who know. And there is a counter to this where there are anti-principles. And I believe that we interpret things as, sentient beings, kinesthetic beings, but we all kind of have this mapping where people express a certain heightened state of the human condition at a greater resonance. And that's really what this is all about. So you're looking at Metatron's cube here, you're looking at something that's occurring here, and the spin energies that take place here, So, I mean, right. And then the refraction out from those 6, 7, and the transient 8. And you're getting the same things happening in these pocketed areas, and ultimately it comes up with what is Metatron's cube. So that's a very brief, abstract explanation of how I came up with the EPL symbol and sigil. More importantly, it's the fundamental of what is necessary to start this energy in motion, right? So we've solidified that this is the symbol, right? So are we, through our walk, going to have to create a choice in our walk, like literally, we find the center of a township, of a place. We find a place where purity is solidified, right? And then because of the spin that we cannot see and the massive speed of that spin, we are going to walk in a direction, whether that's the library, the information that's in a town. I think that the lodge is a very scary thing, because I think those lodges can be placed in such a way where they can be very deceptive. So you look at the library, you look at the theater. Those are constructs of society that have always been around. You just have performers, and there's a natural sort of matriculation that takes place with time, place, events, distance from one another. You have those thespians, in a certain adjacency to the bookworms, right? You have the library. You have the theater. Nowadays we're thinking of a movie theater, as something that's very removed, but those are still thespians. Those are still people gathering up the muse, gathering up the practice of that energy. And it's not just an energy in the immediate. They are supported by the energies from their, we're talking about a predecessorship, we're talking about taking on a Padawan learner, if you will. So what other constructs? You have your food market, right? You have your main marketplace. Even though everything's all messed up and spread around, because you have these taco stands and this and that, what is the main marketplace? Where's the food? So I would say almost the food would probably come first through sacrifice, right? So you might have food. Sacrifice is the first one. It's what we do. We go through the process of these sub-principles of faith. We begin with the pure source. We're looking from the pure source. We come from the pure source. I don't think everyone does, though. Right? So through faith, that's something that a baby can't say faith, shouldn't be able to say faith, but now there's also information, education, through mathematics, through math, geography, and language. You're getting these sort of indigo children that already know these things, and so the information is put in them. The mathematics are put in them. They aren't discovering it. They aren't geniuses. It is downloaded and placed into them. Is this re-embodiment? Is this reincarnation? Is it controlled? I think so. So then you have the sacrifice, So you have an underground that's sacrificing people. Instead of sacrificing through cultivation, they are killing people, or they are lying to, and that's also, there are anti-principles based on these principles. So let's say this is the marketplace, which I'm not dead centered on. I'm not saying that that's what it is. maybe from another standpoint, intellectually, your sheeple, your everyday people, the marketplace is the main thing, a place of sacrifice, right? But the nomad doesn't think that way. The nomad doesn't think that way. The nomad is listening to and following a natural energy, knowing that the spin is taking place, right? So you've got the sacrifice, the cultivation. Maybe you have the marketplace, for the sheeple, right? So I'm going to be rethinking this in a more intellectual way, because that is not what the nomad, the traveler, the one who carries information and doesn't have to say a word from town to town, the mystical stranger that is so provocative in movies, and we're always looking for that person that doesn't need to have credit, and they know when to leave also. At least those energies do. Right? So say you have a marketplace, and then from that marketplace you have the distribution of cultivation, feeding the wisdom. You have sacrifice, expression. Can I write that expression? Sacrifice, expression, wisdom, how it's used. So here it might be the library, because when you cultivate and have the marketplace, typically the marketplace is the restaurant also. You're ready to consume, and from that consumption you have the consciousness, the knowledge, the ability to take that energy, those calories, if you will, the measurement of heat, and utilize that in wisdom. That becomes physical wisdom in the anti-principle. This becomes a muting. So I mean, there's these sort of what are described as reptilian people who, they are automatically working contrary to the production of, and trying to capitalize on the production. They're people that are born that way, where they made this way from the beginning, where they made contrary to create entropy. Does our system rely so heavily on entropy that it is that it's a lost cause? Then we get down here into community. And again, these are displayed as spheres of Metatron's cube. So you've got community. So we take that energy from the wisdom when we come out to community, or is community within? I think that the traveler, it's about the cellular structure and the community of what that person is building, and not an existential concept of this is what I have to offer these people. The people are perfectly content going along with whatever government system is set out until they start to lose things, and then they start to wonder, why am I losing things? But the traveler just knows, like, it's a more primal but a much higher intelligence that's connected into the field around us, which has been hacked, or maybe it always was hacked. But it's like the 100 monkey thing. It's a information that is available, a network, an unseen network that points toward a technology, and the awareness of technology before technology was supposed to have existed. So in that you have your production, because we're able to produce now. Even if we're on our own going through this process, we're able to go through production. Once we've made the food we're using as an example, once we've brought that to marketplace, once the food has gone into us, we've ingested it, and now it is producing the ability to create calories and thought, we are able to, in community, use those calories for invention, for where the placement. We're more aware of the placement of where things go. And I'm not saying that every single town follows this order, but I think that there would be a natural inclination for the distance and the progression of something very close to this that is being thwarted in certain places to create a unique identity in different communities, so that so an obvious mimicking wasn't taking place, where it's like these towns look exactly alike. And nowadays, when you look around and you look at all the strip malls and so forth, towns do look exactly alike. There's almost no difference whatsoever. And then you get into this area where from that production, the USA, Russia, China, you have ego, an identity that's separate from this, or better at utilizing this and understanding this, right? And so this gets back into a bifurcation, right? So from ego, you have a choice. You have a choice to either take the right-hand path or the left-hand path. Now the question is that the left-hand path when you're facing God? Is that God's left hand? Because if God's facing you and you're facing God, this concept of God, then your right is God's left. Correct? I mean, just bear with me. Arguing semantics here, right? Literally. And so if your ego expression is more of a left-hand path, you might still have the concept that you're facing God, but those things become more rationalistic and secular, right? So you have something that's like you're following a religiosity here. This is just you thinking, you expressing, you knowing I've got a golden coin in my pocket from this ego, from this original expression that's done here. And I'm sitting on the pillar of community, and literally the council is here. And if you go to places like the courthouse in Sacramento, you will see a very pagan looking structures that actually have seats that people can sit in right here, right? And they create this sort of shape. No lie. It's this is an extremely ancient, archaic, esoteric information that I'm talking about that can be charted and looked at throughout history. You can dive into it as deep as you'd like to. But this is a construct, and it's also a mathematical construct, because it gets into areas of phi and so forth that I have seen, and witnessed. So you have this bifurcation, you have this energy, but in truth, right, you have some that take the right-hand path and some that take the left-hand path. In fact, that number might even be very close to 50-50. But what if you got a 51-49 type of situation? Or some might even call it a 51-50, right? So now through this process, things are moving, right? Things are moving. And there's this natural inclination of a procession. And there really is a procession going on, right? You're talking about this is happening over a time period. This is happening outside the quantum. It's happening throughout a certain time sequence. You can only get these things done at a certain time of the year. So you're automatically rushed through a process, right? And that also gets into how many months are in the year. There are mathematicians who say there's actually 13 segments to our year, to our calendar year, if you really got into the truth of it. But some of these energies are going to go back. You're not going to get the ego in expression. You're going to get a repeat of that energy. But what happens is you're not just going to go back through the cycle. Some of this energy that's created just through movement, through ritual, is going to be able to create a construct. Because what's happening here? It's creating this pyramidical shape of return. So then you kind of get into the concepts of this dualistic pyramid, and you start to see how this shape is mimicking the shape that's already being manifest, right? The movement, the placement, right? One octave tone sounds really great, but to listen to that over and over again doesn't represent the tonality of these changes, these differences. But what is the original construct? What is the original tonal construct? Because all of these represent colors, and therefore tones, and therefore designations and placements. And why would we be any different? Why would our nervous system be manifest any different, right? So who we are, this is a construct of who we are. This is a construct of Solomon's temple. This is a construct of how things happen, but how much it is engineered and dictated is hard to say. So some of these energies are going to return back to where they were, right? Because this is so strong, this point. This is now wisdom. This is now expression. It has an identity. Some of these energies are going to come back. There's going to be an attempted bifurcation going on here, right? These energies are going to try to come back to the center point again, as I had pointed out previously. You start to see something that looks like the construct of a face. But this is really the mapping system and the language of what's really going on, our work, the work that is carried on through our genetics, is carried on culturally, and is expressed in how we are laid out as not individuals, but pockets of groups that represent the supporters and the carriers of these. It's not just an idea that you want to go be an actor, you want to be a thespian. It's not just an idea that you want to be a cook. There is a duty, there is an honor system, there is a preset notion, and this gets into the areas of free will, or freedoms. Like freedom isn't free type of construct. But what happens is not all this energy is returned. Some of that energy goes back into itself. Some of this energy wants to travel around. Some of this energy because this is moving again, it wants to go back to this spherical sheen, this protective spherical sheen, because it's moving. It's solidified in itself, it's authenticated, and therefore monad is reproduced. And because monad, when we get into certainty and uncertainty, it is certain. It has its own identity in the construct of all of these various spheres of existence or thought, right? It's also going to flip back on itself, which I pointed out here. So you do have this weaker area, this opening, right? It's kind of just below there in sacrifice, right? But it's also going to still have the integrity of this spherical sheen or shell, And again, does that not look like an insect? So you're seeing a construct that is a universal construct begin to appear, and that in a greater sense, from sort of a holographic sense, is you have this smaller unit that represents like Metatron's cube, a larger structure that is still tied to its origins, which I am pointing out right here. So I laid out the abstract, but what's not looked at is this very crucial area here. And this meeting point, this junction point. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And 8, a grid with 8 points here is a very universal and common construct. So if I were taking this through the same procession, this right spinning sort of procession, where would it begin? Well, it wouldn't begin here because there's a break here in this conical energy, right? And supposedly there is this conical type of energy. If you were to look at this like planet Earth, there is a conical energy or conical opening that occurs just as part of what we would call natural science. So it would occur here. And what I'm getting at is there is a spin energy that takes place because there is a spin energy. It's called swirl on. And as this is taking place, this process is naturally taking place, you have this clock. You have this time signature. And as this clock is spinning, it is going through what is represented in the ram's horn, through Phi, the conch shell. It's seen in a lot of beautiful, and some might say perfected forms of nature. And so it's kind of spinning into itself. Where does it end and where does it begin? How many segments? Or better yet, what is the ratio? What I've found is you have 13 steps. You have 13 segments. It begins under the break here. All right, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do we count that one? I would say we do count it. But 8 is also a very transient number. And the fact that we get to 8, I believe at the top of the number system that we use in a very primal and primitive way is 7. And that 8 is it being a transient sort of number that isn't necessarily solidified and seen, but it is more of a moniker, a sigil, if you will, a lower or lesser sigil that allows this monad to take place. And it is an ethereal number system. And that number 9 itself does not exist. That a 3 exists, a 6 exists, but a 9 does not exist. That 9 represents repeat, a sacrifice between this duality where unholy, if you will, unnatural sacrifices take place in order to, I would say, compromise the carnal, the temporal, the corporeal aspects of life and government and a static self-will of being able to stay in one place, give yourself a certain titleship, a rulership, but never allow the natural flow of things to occur from the pure source energy. Children are sacrificed. Adrenochrome is and the harvesting of that is a thing, whether you want to see it or not. So we have here 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 before it goes back into itself. So You have your 513 procession. So I believe that any walk that is going to be mimicking this energy, and I think that's how we do it, is simple and straightforward as it seems. It's with our own 2 feet, our right and our left, to be able to make that choice. And so we have this walk that takes on this shape, right? We're walking here, we're walking here. And then which direction do we go in? I would have a predisposition to go in the right-hand path, which I have. And so there are opportunities that seem to be blocked off to you, and you don't realize where you're supposed to drive and where you're supposed to go. If you're following a left-hand path, and maybe you're going through cycles and you're a superstar and you're trying to create the balance, but by trying to create the balance, you are justifying the carnal and the corporeal. There must be a direction, and there must be an acknowledgement that one direction doesn't work and the other direction does work, right? And that we're moving on to what they call a new world order. They're the ones that term this. They're the ones that use this term. They're the ones that tried to create this esoteric strangeness about the term. But the old world order doesn't work. And the new world order really is the old world order, the natural order of the world. So they're going to try to pollute this and toxify it again. So a walk obviously can't be too complex, and it can't start at an area where you're and you're going to find that if you were to go through this, if you started at the town square, right, and you walked over to, an area where there's a farming community, right, and then you walked over here to where there's the warehouses where the food goes, and you walk over here where that food is now going into the main restaurant through the main street, right? The original place where all the food was eaten and divvied out. And then you're gonna go to a place, say like the library, or maybe the theater, right? You're gonna try to look at your town and find this construct that maybe existed at a time. You're gonna have to use your intellectual prowess to see what these areas are really about, because there's going to be a lot of covertness. There's going to be a lot of blockage going on, so that you can't see that area is in itself, because of the people, because of the matriculation, because of the energy around the area, because of the cultivation. It has proved itself to be a sustainable sphere of community, and therefore working with that energy and purifying that energy. That is the cause, that is the aim. Now, control and the same, to me, would be like the left-hand path. But perhaps both of these walks would need to be completed, where you go through that same exact walk. You might try and figure out what the anti of that walk is, but I would urge you to be very careful, because you might meet the so-called devil on the road, the devil of destroying your efforts at. You can't let your mind wander with each step. This sounds like nothing. How much do you walk? How much are you allowed to walk? There was even a term Vulcan, which loosely translated into like masturbator. That is, somebody who walks about is considered a vagabond, right? It's always been looked down upon. It's what they don't want you to do, to go through the procession with your own 2 feet, and to be able to gather information that's being given to you and stay in a pure sense while you're going for your walk. your exercise. You are exercising out the demons. Some, very few, but at a time, would go through these walks and they would come to places where they would do crimes because they're going through an anti-principle. This right here, until it's put into practice, until you put your energy into it, it's only a sigil. It only represents a potential. Once your feet start to move, you are in it. And I'll tell you, you are already in it. People live and die, and they never realize that they have the power to go through this process. When you come out of this process and you do this 3 times, your life will change. And you will be pulled toward your curiosities, if that is your predisposition, if that's who you truly are. David Hume, become what you are. So we would start here, say, we would walk here, we would walk back. I don't know how big your town is, but things seem to be pretty close by, and most small towns might be something to consider. Whatever town you're from, that's the arduous task that you're going to have to deal with. So you have this bifurcation, you have this return back to this place, right? Back to, say, for lack of a better, the town square. Isn't that strange how they call it a square, right? Mecca. And so you're returning back to that area. Now you may want to complete this and say, you're routing this negative energy away, right? Away from a left-hand path. You're going right. You're taking this energy and you're going right, right? And you might end up right back there. And then you would go through this process where you'd have to find this area, because it will manifest. You would have to find this area where there's a void, right? And you're trying to go about taking this energy, and that's where people might look at you funny. And then again, there may be an empty lot right here where you're pretty easily. Now, if we were to get really precise about this and measure this out, not only in equal distance, but to see what the culmination of energy from sacrifice, now that I've gained, from, expression, now that I've gained, from wisdom, now that I've gained, from community, now that I've gained, from production, now that I've gained, from ego, now that I've gained, and now I'm taking that energy and I am, in a sense, I'm no longer building the energy, but I am delivering it. I'm solidifying my place and my statement, right? And now you have a way. You think of this as something that's just a mad concept, but how many steps in life have you taken that actually have a direction? Really think about that. You work for a company, you're given a set of principles. They're put in front of you. You're following their principles, and we don't even know what the hell they mean. And then we see by their fruits, you shall know them. We see that they weren't up to altruistic, benevolent purposes. They acted like it, but no, the company itself didn't do really good things, and it didn't. And so this here, you're going to start to see that your thoughts and the thoughts that come to you, you're going to have to be very guarded. But you are going through a ritual where you can make announcements and pronouncements to your town. And all the while, you spin your energy. You spin it, you spin it, you spin it. Why am I doing this? Does it look like I'm going on a left-hand path? Well, you're walking, right? This little stick figure, and you're walking. You're going forward. You're going through the procession of this, right? And we're not spinning down. We're not spinning our energy down, but you may be spinning back as you're cultivating energy, right? And then you start to spin down as you're thinking and making your lamentations. You're lamenting. You're seeing what's wrong. You may even want to start this to where you are circling, right? And what does this look like? It looks like the number 8, right? What does that really look like? You're going through this bifurcation, coming around here, you're returning back, right? When you return home, right, you're going to start this process. And I believe that this is the kata, this is the exercise, this is the work that we need to do in order to get back to a place where there's a pure source of force, so that that can become our truth. So here we have the walks, the rituals to place toward. This is not a 5-step. This is a 6-step walk. Because what I had left out was the fact that the 4th walk needs to be a sealing off of this energy. It's extremely crucial. And in a sense, that's what the point of this whole ritual is to bring back purity through exercise, procession, process of the sigil, the symbol, the sign, and to seal this off. And then to go about, see, you have the duality in the triangle, in the pyramid. You have the lesser phi, you have the greater phi. You have the parameter monad locking in the energy, saying this is a unit of energy. So the next thing that one has to do is look at their local area. Where were you raised? What energy what area are you called to? And map out where you can do this walk. The locations need to be precise. Obviously, there has to be a center location. You have to find that pure source of force. You know where that pure center is in your area. And make sure you are pure and you are not tainted when you go about doing this walk. This isn't just a walk. This is a kata. This represents who you are. And if you will to be better, we're all doing it. We're all going through this procession, whether we know it or not. And most of us do it quite poorly. To map it out is just to map it out. To actually go through and try to do it, maybe you'll be killed before you can complete it. Maybe something will happen to you. But you are going through kata, going through the exercise. You have a purpose. And how many things in life do you have this much of a purpose for? Esoteric principles of light, methods from madness, the purified practice of principles in motion, the kata, the walk to a better world.